In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 390. This week on the show, I'm joined by NoPro's arts editor, Laura Hess, to talk about the 2023 Without Walls Festival, a production of the Jolla Playhouse, which took place in San Diego last weekend, and which we both attended, although never did manage to run into each other despite having a few hours of overlap. Before we get into the episode, a disclosure. I've been working behind the scenes with the WoW team for some stuff for the future, but we'd also be remiss if we didn't talk about what is the most significant performing arts festival in the United States for works with non-traditional staging, including immersive works, which are our focus here. Okay, with that done, a few announcements. We are just 1 month away from the Next Stage Immersive Summit, and the momentum is kicking in with badges and class passes starting to fly out the door. Join the next great gathering of the immersive creative community as they come to Los Angeles for 3 days of dinners, salons, talks, panels, and making new connections across the breadth of the immersive field. At the end of next week is when we begin to schedule both the workshops for those who have bought class passes and the affinity dinners. So this next week is the best time to get your badge and get your choices in if those are your bag. Not only is our invited guest lineup stacked with guests from Riot Games, Meow Wolf, Moment Factory, Games for Change, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Jolla Playhouse, but the badge holders make up an equally impressive roster of folks from the biggest companies in the business to rising indie creators. And with so many participatory sessions, town hall, the salons, the affinity dinners, and just 200 badge holders in total, you'll have a chance to meet them all. No, really, that's how we build this thing. It's all happening June 2nd to 4th in downtown LA at the historic Herald Examiner building, which now serves as the campus for Arizona State University's California Center. Thank you, ASU, for being our hosts. And 2 blocks from our official hotel, the Ace Hotel, there in downtown LA. Take your immersive career to the next level at the next stage. Finally, a shout out to our latest backer, Michael Campion, who is keeping us just on the right side of our $3K a month goal. Seriously, we're like at $2 over. We were like at like 40 last month. It is, as I note, a near thing right now. And I know times are tight for everyone. But if you find real value in what we do, your $2 or $5 a month pledge makes all the difference in the world over here. Hitting up patreon.com/NoProscenium not only powers the podcast and websites for NoPro and everything immersive, it also gets you into our member-only Discord. This is our only source of income. This is my only steady source of income. And the math doesn't really work. So if you can, it means a lot. If you're already a backer, and so many of you are, drop a review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice and share the articles you find useful on your social media platform of choice. It helps immensely. We are always No Proscenium, except on Insta, where we are No_Proscenium. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mystery, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Tom Lee and Eddie McGuire, Winthorne, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hanson, Lecker LeCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. We're also on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. And now, on with the show. Last weekend, a few of us here at No Proscenium headed down to San Diego to check out Jolla Playhouse's Without Walls Festival. That is the site specific and non traditional theater and performing arts in general festival that happens in San Diego. This edition, which is now on an annual schedule, took place at the Ratty Shell at Jacobs Park, which is the home of the San Diego Symphony. I was there, and also there, although we were at different times and did not see each other, despite how many people I saw at the festival, which for me was one of the best parts of it all, is our arts editor, Laura Hess. Hey, Laura.
Hi, Noah.
So we had some crossover with what we saw. We also did some totally different things, or spent more time on some stuff than others. But I thought we'd start with the collab between the symphony and La Jolla for this one, which is a shared space. Maybe you can explain it a bit, because it's a bit of an unusual event.
Yeah, I'll do my best on this one. So a shared space, it's really about utilizing your phone as an instrument. So this is a communal co-creation. You are working with on the lawn there in front of the shell. There were live musicians who were performing in real time. And there was a QR code that was very easy to scan. And through that, you could use your phone as its own instrument, which had really interesting sounds coming out of it, not necessarily related to like a traditional the traditional sounds of an instrument that you might be familiar with. There were kind of, crackles and sort of popping or sort of, I don't know, what do I want to say, like sort of wet, squiggly sounds, which was really fun.
Yeah,
So this was
they sort of
about.
worked. They had two modes. They had shake and tilt, which would tell you what you were doing with the phone. And over time, I realized that shake was kind of like, an egg shaker, sometimes like a tambourine, but mostly like an egg shaker. And the tilt was very much at times a rainmaker, or like
Mhm.
a weird, digital tortured droid rainmaker based on the sound that was happening. But it functioned like a rainmaker because the pitch and the pitch and the tone and the speed of everything was based on how you tilted it. Or rain
Right.
stick,
Yeah.
I should say, not a rainmaker, rain stick. Y'all knew what I meant.
Yeah. I think I said like wet squiggly, so I think your your definition was probably closer anyway.
So there was that mix. So there were people playing, like the symphony was playing parts. Like how exactly, how did it work as a gestalt for you?
Well, so I think what was I really leaned into. So I've talked about some really gorgeous, innovative productions in the past, like The Adjacent Possible, which was a remote production. You experience this through your computer. You're not seeing, there's no video on, no mic, but it is again co-creation of a musical work. And this was so social. And I really just leaned far into that. My whole approach for
Mm.
this festival was last year, I really was trying to see as much as possible. And I am someone who really likes to um, just do as much as I can. I really want to take it all in. This year, I decided let me really just try to enjoy what I'm going to get a chance to see. And I went for a shorter period of time overall. And so I really just leaned into the social part of this. I wasn't trying to explore all aspects of the experience and try to understand the experience. I was really there just to play with the people that I was with. I loved watching the uh, the musicians who were on the lawn. I loved how they were interacting with other attendees, milling about. So for me, it was more of kind of the macro, just taking it all in, and just enjoying the process of play. But I would sort of dip in and dip out of actually using my phone, and sometimes I was just observing.
I love that you mentioned, kind of approaching this really socially. the festival overall. I wonder if some of that was because it was free this time. So kind of the pressure to do it all, to like get to your tickets and make sure, you were extracting maximum value, was just obliterated because, well, it's all free and you either got in or did a standby and a lot of stuff. There was plenty of standby room, sometimes literally
Right.
standby for certain pieces. Um, do you think that factored into that decision process there?
I thought about it, and I think that I actually did feel ultimately a little bit torn because I thought it was incredible that it was all offered at no cost to attendees, to participants. I thought that was just really amazing to make it, inclusive and accessible in that way. So there was part of me that was, again, really wanted to milk that for all it was worth. I wanted to scoop up reservations for everything, but because of the time frame, I really did have to limit it. So for me, it was actually less of an issue, or it was less of a factor in terms of this being free at no cost or being a price ticket. And it was more just my time limitations.
Yeah. I also found a shared space to be most interesting when one leaned into the social aspect of it. Cause like I wandered around, with a can of overpriced beer in my hand around the lawn, and was like going close to where the musicians were, and then like just kind of waving my phone around or trying to get like a good timing going on, and it was shaking, and like I didn't hear a lot of other people's phones, and the basically the musicians had like a measure or two, maybe even two is too many, maybe just a measure of music that they would play during a given sequence, and then there was an iPad that people were hitting and like advancing things forward or changing which mode our phones were in, and also what music they were playing, the symphony was playing. But it wasn't really until I stumbled on Jessica Crean and Unique Trapman O'Brien. I spotted them on the lawn and ran over, and we were all playing with our phones together. And specifically in the tilt mode, we were kind of just like, rotating all three of our phones like around each other, and that was creating interesting sounds, even though they were all making the same sound, because there was a slight difference to where our hands were as we were kind of, circling each other. Uh, it, the sum of the parts was greater, right? Like the whole was greater than the sum of the parts is actually what I'm trying to
Right,
say.
right. And
Um,
I do think that that could be like, you're not going to be able to check off every single box in a situation like this. I do think that, yes, I had there were some sound issues for me in terms of what I could isolate and how then I wanted to interact with what I could isolate. And so, but that's also the joy of being in this large group outdoors at this beautiful location and having the live musicians there, and what was carrying when I wound up sitting for a spell near a very large drum, and completely, it was sort of off to the side, and the musician was playing other instruments as well, and classic, very kind of comedic trope of like, when he got around to hitting the drum, absolutely, I'd completely forgotten it was there. And so there were really, I mean, kind of like levitated for a moment. So there were really lovely moments that come out of those communal experiences where it's not about, it does sound like the three of you had this really cool moment. And it's also okay if people didn't have that. Having that, just enjoying this sort of cacophony that, and then things that would come into um, kind of my own little orbit, little sounds and snippets that would pop in. The whole thing was such an interesting progression because it wasn't this perfectly controlled environment.
mm. Well, we've spent a lot of time on shared space, so
Yeah.
I want to move us forward from that one. I'll do a quick hit on some of the dance based works that I saw. Some of which were one of which was on the lawn, another of which was over at the basketball court. That's I think that's roughly important, just because of the surfaces people were performing on. And I tagged this one as the dance pieces, but I'm really the movement pieces. So there was choreo and fly, which there's always a choreo and something at the Without Walls, and there's a theme. And what was sort of striking about that one is when we got there were just kites everywhere on the radio shell. Like people were just flying the kites left and right, and they were able to do that for the entire length of the show. And there was once they started the pieces, there was one that really felt like it was capturing the vibe of the kites and the theme of flight. And then as it kind of went on, the theme just seemed to completely disappear. There was one piece, there was just two performers just rolling on the ground when the theme was fly. I was like, well, that's a really interesting choice to just not fly. Like, I get it. There's like, well, if the theme is fly, then what we're gonna do, and it just felt like it overthought itself into being something that was also very hard to see because you're in this big public space and people are standing all around. You got two performers rolling around on the ground, and it's just in front of the tech table. It's just not very visible. And by the
Oh,
end, there
that's
was
yeah. Okay.
yeah, right. And then in the end piece, there was a bit where there was something involving feathers, and unfortunately, by the time they got to that one, we had kind of tuned out because it was just hard to see what was going on, and the pieces didn't really seem to be on theme so much, and didn't reference the kites that were in the air at all.
Oh,
Uh,
that's interesting. So those are flying overhead, but there's no
mhm.
integration between
Mm-mm.
the mo- the movements and the kites.
Only it really only felt like the first one was, I mean, they weren't dancing with a kite, but their movements seemed to be very much inspired by that.
Mm.
um so and this is one of the one of the tricks with like a big public performing art, right? Like, and this is something there's a lot of it. Wow. And you kind of got to go for spectacle because you're in a chaotic environment. There's lots of things going on. There's lots of people. There's kids running around who aren't really interested. Big puppets work really well. Salty Water, which came up after Choreo and Fly, had big puppets. It was very engaging for the kids. Um, I again kind of like let that one kind of wash over me through osmosis. But there was this big squid puppet they brought out, like a kraken that was big and orange and seemed to be made of like bubble wrap, which I thought was fascinating. Um, and I was sort of like absorbing the vibes of the space. It was also, I don't know, it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was overhead, and I already had like a beer by that point. So I was I was definitely like a little soft focus in that moment. But uh, what I was really digging the vibe, and I thought that I could tell that kids were really into what was going on, and that was
Yeah.
fantastic. And then there was this piece from the Netherlands, which was really an acrobatics piece called 360. That's the one that was over when I saw it on the basketball court. And what was interesting there is they gave us all, not all, but they had a certain number of little rolling stools, and they shepherded us around to create like lines at one point that they would like do bits in between. They gathered us all up at a certain point and were doing bits in the middle of us. And it's the kind of thing where if you were on the lawn and watching, it would have just been like, okay, they're doing acrobatics. But because you were up close, you could really see the strain and the stress of what they were doing, what it was doing to their bodies, right? And that's one of the things that's really interesting in this type of work when you take really intense physical theater, um, and put it up close. It becomes its own kind of magic trick. It's
Hmm.
one of the things that makes Sleep No More so special is watching the choreography close enough that you can see him sweat. And it just, I suspect it sort of creates a connection between you and the performer, because when you see a body in that kind of stress, you can't help but start to physically empathize a bit with what's
Right.
happening. Um, at least the way I'm wired. Um,
I think you
so
both empathize, and I think it helps you become very present. I mean,
yeah,
if you're not already, I mean, to notice that, to notice the work that is going, especially when you can see the physical manifestations of that work, you can see the sweat, and especially if that performance is being delivered in a way that it makes it look very effortless. Having that reminder of this is not effortless. This takes incredible skill and endurance and conditioning. And I think that also really grounds you. It really centers you, in addition to having that layer of empathy.
yeah. So that those were sort of three big movement pieces that I caught and over the course of this. There were some others in the festival as a whole, but I wasn't around for those nights. I didn't get a chance to see some of that stuff, even though I was very jealous of those who did. Um, you and I caught a little bit, but did you stick around for the whole of Brassroots?
I did, because I had missed it in Los Angeles, and
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I had so profoundly regretted that, and it just was sort of a mix of things. And I was so frustrated with myself for having missed it when it was in Los Angeles. So I was very grateful that there was another chance to get to experience it. And for me, that was actually my launch into this year's WoW experience. So it was
Oh,
the absolute perfect kickoff
that's incredible.
to, yeah,
That also means
yeah.
we were both there, because like Todd and I swung through, caught the opening number, and then we had somewhere to go. But for those who don't know, we're talking about Brassroots District live in the lot summer '73, which made its debut in 2021 in Los Angeles in a parking lot. In the arts district, ran for about a month, and then Delta came up and sort of chased everyone away from doing art for a hot minute. And it's this it is both a concert of like the debut concert of this fictional funk band called Brassroots District, and it's also this story. It's kind of an immersive theater as happening as a retro concert, all at a go. So how do you feel about it? We've talked about it a lot on the show before, but I'd love to know what you think.
Well, I'm going to repeat things that people have already said, but just to kind of add my voice to that chorus, the band itself is incredible. There's no way to have a bad time listening to, watching, dancing to this band. These are incredibly talented musicians, great stage presence, like all the charisma. It's just, that is such a good time in and of itself. And because it is set in 1973, no one had a smartphone at that time. And so I love it's a very simple device. It is incredibly effective. I didn't see a single person pull out their phone. When we checked in, for anyone who hasn't been, we were given a little yellow plastic, like Ziploc, basically. And no one takes your phone from you. You are handed this little pouch, this little plastic pouch, and you're directed to put your phone in it, seal it up, tuck it in your pocket, your purse, whatever, and do not pull it out during the whole show. And it is amazing how effective that was. I didn't really think about my phone anymore. A couple of other people that I chatted with, they said they just kind of have it, reached for their phone in their pocket, felt the plastic pouch, and then they were like, oh, right. And I didn't see a single person pull out their phone. And it is such a gift to be able to, again, be very present in a show. I'm someone who, I love taking photos. It's a way that I kind of connect further with an experience. but I'm also very grateful to be forced to not engage with my phone and to just enjoy the show. Yeah, it was and it's a very gentle show in terms of, I was chatting about this with a few people. The interaction, since we're referencing Sleep No More a bit, and I'm going to reference it when we get to La Lucha, it's very gentle in terms of the interaction. For people who may not be sure about immersive theater, is this something that they're new to? Are they not necessarily comfortable with interaction? The way that this storyline is presented that falls under that immersive theater umbrella, it's very welcoming, but it's also very gentle. Nothing is forced on you. There's no kind of forced interaction. So you can really interact with the performers as much or as little as you like. And I really appreciated that design. It was very nuanced.
Yeah, there's definitely something really great about this show being people's first taste of an immersive experience that involves performing arts and involves actors you can interact with and play with,
Mm-hmm.
because yes, there's a story going on, but the story is told in a way that is just kind of ambient and a happening. The core of it's the music. The music is fantastic, and all the things you're being asked to do are generally the things you would do if you were just really enjoying yourself at a concert. And
Right.
by being shaken up out of your normal mode, you wind up really enjoying yourself at the concert. And if you want to
Yes.
get a little more into it, if you want to push a little bit into the characters' lives, like the performers are game enough not to like derail everything, but they'll give you a little bit of flavor. And it's such a smart construct, and it can serve a lot of people. I think from what I could tell, like maybe the production team was a little like concerned about, you know, there were just lots of folks there who maybe didn't really know what they were getting into, and maybe didn't want to like adhere to the vibe. But I imagine I can't wait to talk to them, because like I really want to know what their take was on a very different audience, an audience that wasn't like trying to hunt them down, but were sort of served this experience up. Because I gotta imagine those folks were just charmed, and I hope the team was charmed by them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you caught you caught something I didn't, which we've talked about on on in the pod, not the pod. We've talked about it on the site before because it was part of the Philly Fringe, and that is Fair Trade, which is the collaboration between Jessica Green and Unique Trapman O'Brien, who are both Philadelphia-based artists who brought this out to WoW, and it's very exciting for us to see that kind of action happening. The kind of work we're covering on one coast coming over to another. It's just that's exciting in itself. Um, what is this piece for those who don't know? And yeah, what was your experience of it?
So even within our no proscenium community, I do, there are times where I really do try to isolate myself from some of this information with the hope that I will get to experience something for myself. And I knew the basic premise for fair trade, which is um, two participants come together, and there are instructions given ahead of time. You have some items that you are at least willing to exchange. You need to bring things with you, and this is more specifically laid out, but I won't get into all of the details. Um, and it is an anonymous experience, at least in part. You have a facilitator. In this case, for me, Yannick was my facilitator, and he leads. It's roughly an hour long, and he leads the two participants through, I mean, like other pieces by Jessica Green and Yannick Trapman O'Brien, like it is an incredibly layered, um, really playful, humor filled, but also very graceful and vulnerable exploration of the human condition. It really is. It really is a beautiful piece. And so you are guided through, and there are different, these are my words, but there's kind of different chapters of the experience, or at least that's how it resonated with me. And they're beautifully integrated, and similar to other works of Jessica's and Yannick's, it is both an incredibly kind of solitary experience, or maybe a better way of phrasing that is it's a deeply, deeply personal experience. And it is also a communal exchange, both with the facilitator and with the other participant, who you may or may not wind up meeting. And there's a lot of considerations around choice and what is your own values and how you want to move through the world. It was more than I was expecting, not because I didn't have high expectations. It was that they really exceeded my expectations. And I was surprised by how moved I was. At times, I was delighted by the levels of humor. So an incredibly layered, rich experience.
Oh no, I feel extra bad that I missed it.
I'm sorry.
Let me ask you this. Did you make a trade?
I did. And what was interesting about my experience was that there were some, there was a hiccup, which is so interesting. This was not at all planned, but it was so fascinating how this wound up embodying questions and themes of the piece. So the participant and I had reached an agreement, and then the trade wasn't exchanged as it was decided on. And I don't know why I didn't speak up. I think this was purely a miscommunication. I do not think that my fellow participant was, trying to pull one over on me. Like, I think this was purely just a miscommunication. But it was really interesting then how, because there is so much about what is fair. What do you think is fair? And how does what does that actually mean to you? And how does that show up in your life in all sorts of ways? And in that moment, I knew that this wasn't what we'd agreed to, but I just kind of went along with it. And it was interesting, all the emotions that pulled up, which was so perfectly, like, the piece hadn't even ended, and I was wrestling anew with some of the things that we had just sort of worked through, both individually and together.
All right. One of the ones that I caught that you didn't was Clean the Stables, which was one of two pieces here. I'm gonna reach over on my desk and get something, because there were two pieces in the festival this year that were part of the Heracles project. One of which and each of these projects, this is about like the environment. There's it's a multidisciplinary creative research project in 12 tasks reimagined by the Incubator Collective. So that's the project, the 12 tasks being, of course, the 12 tasks of Hercules, for those who know their mythology. Task 9 was the Belt of Hippolyta, and that one was called Glacial Incantations. It was an AR. It was a physical and AR installation along one side of the shell. That one, the physical installation was interesting. There were these kind of like blow up plastic ice sculpture people, but then the AR component of it seemed to just be that you had to download an app, and then you activated a QR code, and then the QR code would would have a static photo appear superimposed over a rock, which seemed like a whole lot of effort for very little payoff
Mm-hmm.
when the, you know, and there was also an audio track, but that audio track was not linked to it. That was a different audio track you were running, and there was a different app and all that. So I tell you this in part because going into cleaning the stables, because it's stablemate was this project where the tech was very much not cohesive and seemed like a lot of effort for very little payoff. I was a little bit trepidatious. Um, we arrived just in time. There were all these people sitting around in these red, janitorial, big shirts that kind of felt janitorial in nature, that said Hera Clean on it. They had name tags that were not your name; they were character names. And at first I thought that everyone was like a ringer. And then I quickly realized like, no, this is just people who just had gotten there like before us and were settled in. And we did have to go to a website. We were given a big laminate card that had all of the character names on it and short descriptions. And you read your description of the character whose shirt you were wearing. And then you went into the app and you found your character's name, you moved some sliders around. I'm not entirely sure what those did in that moment or whatnot. And then you waited for everyone to be ready, and everyone was to hit the go button at the same time. That would then start a audio track that was to some degree interactive in that we were wearing headsets that had microphones, and occasionally we were asked to talk into the microphone and answer a question. Other times we were asked to talk to each other. Oftentimes we were told to just like keep on pretending we're cleaning. We were given completely impractical cleaning instruments and then told to go clean the trees, which was hilarious. There
I have
were
to jump in here that, like, for anyone that hasn't seen the photograph of Noah from his
yes.
WoW diary, it is worth it to look at that while you are listening to this part.
Yes, there is a photo. I put it in a selfie of me wearing the shirt, holding an extended toilet brush that was like neon green, wearing the headset and also my sunglasses, just because I was wearing my sunglasses to go outside. And so, like, what's interesting about this one, it's not that I have mixed feelings about this one. I'm very clear about this one in that I really enjoyed myself and it was overstuffed. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
one or two elements too many in terms of what's going on, if only because those one or two elements aren't being paid off. And the thing that kept getting me that I wasn't really clear about is that we would be told we were going to be given a choice. And we were told, if you want to do this, go to this flag. If you want to do this, go to that flag. And so I would hear that. And then almost before I could start moving, it would start talking to me about like I had made a choice already. And there were a bunch of moments where we were asked to like do something, in character, in terms of talking to another person. And that didn't seem to have any consequences. And there was one moment where we all did rock, paper, scissors. And it was supposed to be that the winner was supposed to recite something and the loser was supposed to recite something else. And the woman who I was with, we tied. And I was trying to indicate to her that we should both say the winner stuff together. She didn't hear me because her headphones were up too much. And then she took offense that I was saying the winner parts and actually kind of got a little dickish with me. Even though
Oh,
I was trying to get us to like both do it. And so that was really off-putting, but that wasn't, and you know, that's me trying to play with someone in the terms of the game, but the game wasn't supporting the state of play we were in together, which was that we were tied.
yes.
There was no
Yeah.
injunction of if you tie, do this. So trying to keep the momentum and trying not to of that was zany and trying not to just, stand there looking at someone, listening to the radio, But there's no affordance for that. And that was sort of my main problem with the piece, is that there were all these things dumped in which created affordances which then weren't paid off. But the core experience of wandering around a park, participating in a ritual of cleaning the stables, of which doubled as cleaning up the park, but not really, and having like weird techno dance break moments where you're supposed to like keep on doing the same motion over and over again. And indeed, at one point, kind of probably just weirding out any normals in the area was delightful. So really joyous, really delightful, irreverent with like a hint of poignancy around the environmental themes, but just, and the tech to some degree was working, like the web-based part of it, the fact that it was all being delivered by the web, worked just fine, and there was no issues there. But some of the stuff, like unclear if there was like GPS stuff that was supposed to be happening, and that moment where like there was no affordance for a tie, right? Which, if that lady had been like slightly more tightly wound or something like that, that could have maybe gone ugly. Just for the record, I'm thinking about this a lot more than I have in the past 2 days in terms of that moment with that lady. I have not been like obsessing over that lady. So I'm just sitting here going like, oh yeah, that was actually, come to think of it, that wasn't that great. But like, all that being said, like just the core idea, particularly because at one point it framed the story framed itself internally at one point as being like this ritual that people did to try and like reconnect to like the Herculean power, the mythological power. And I was like, well, that's just a really interesting idea. So there's just a lot of ideas, and it's like, if there were 25 ideas in this, I'm like, cut 5.
Yeah.
Cut 5 ideas, let it run clean, give us the room to breathe a little.
Right.
Which is often, that's a note, it's actually the opposite note of something one of my teachers gave me a long time ago, which was, to just like, you just gotta let the air out, right? Sometimes you want to tighten things up, like you gotta get things tight. Just, you gotta let the air out, or you gotta let it breathe. That's often the condition of a piece when it's about 85% of the way there. You just have to find out, does this need room to let everyone breathe into it because you're trying to cram too much in, or are you giving it too much space and you're treating everything too preciously, and you got to let the moment be the moment and go on. And in this case, they need to give some breathing room, and they need to cut some stuff. And I think once they do, going to be really good.
Okay.
Yeah. You caught something that I only caught a glimpse of, and that's Birdman.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of, I guess the segue here is, as you're talking about intentionality and design and having, maybe 25 amazing ideas, but it is just too crammed in. Birdman absolutely nails the design. Now, this is a very different experience. So Birdman, this is a roaming puppetry art installation. So it is 3 gigantic birds. You have live performers. They are on stilts. This is, I do want to give a shout out. So this is by the Close Act Theater based in the Netherlands. So they roam. You could see them. I saw like the tips of them at one point during daylight hours, but the real effect you got at night. So there's a mix. The design, I think, is so spot on. It's I just think that it's actually like perfection. There's kind of this otherworldly sort of alien aspect to it. There's a prehistoric, kind of dinosaur, sort of skeleton. There's things that both look familiar, but look like maybe they've been, it's a fossil, it's excavated skeleton, but it also looks like it could be from the future. And the detail, I keep saying, but it's difficult to describe. I would encourage anyone to look at, photographs or video, but the eyes, which are not manipulated by the puppeteers, there's kind of this rotation. I don't know exactly what the design was, but the actual irises look like they're sort of articulated, or they're sort of moving, they're reflective, really stunning. So what happens is they move, at least what I saw was there was sort of this processional to kind of this stairwell area, which is how you get up onto the lawn. So um, there's this space that it feels a little bit theatrical. There's trees, and the birds do interact with the trees. And I think the thing that I want to highlight overall is that, well, two things. So there's no, there's no script, there's no dialogue, there's no overarching narrative. The birds come along, they do interact with each other a little bit, they do interact with the trees, acting like they're kind of eating from the trees. They interact with the audience. But this is a very kind of straightforward presentation in terms of these are giant, beautifully constructed puppets. There is sound design. And again, they could articulate kind of the wings would come out, and then through their upper body movements, the puppeteer's upper body movements, they could manipulate the head. And so they're doing a lot at once. And the makeup is really stunning. And the thing that landed with me, other than just, again, like you're referencing spectacle, this was a gorgeous spectacle. People were so engaged. And at one point, because of where I was standing, one of the birds started to walk directly towards me. And I was making eye contact with the puppeteer. So you have different situations like Warhorse, where the puppeteer might, which is a theatrical production, and the puppeteers kind of, they sort of recede into the background in a sense. Your focus really is on the puppets. And in that case, some of them were giant horses. There were even some like ducks. So whether it was large or small puppets, you're not focused on the puppeteer. You really kind of are able to tune them out. In this case, when I was making eye contact with the puppeteer who had this amazing makeup on, and I was absolutely gripped by both having this moment with the puppeteer, which felt terrifying in a really delicious way, and then and then also interacting with the bird puppet. And a lot of times you don't get that dual interaction that feels both separate but also really seamlessly integrated. And it was just incredibly joyful. It was absolutely perfect for any age. It's something where you can just dip in and dip out. It's spectacle, but it's beautifully crafted. And the sound design it felt kind of like creepy, but also familiar. It felt like a dinosaur call, but there was also something in there that felt like the pings of an underwater submarine. There were things that you're like, I sort of know this, but there's enough like disconnect that, again, it really helps to focus you in the moment. I loved it if it wasn't obvious by now.
No, it wasn't obvious. I'm so glad you made that clear.
I mean, I could go on.
Yeah, you do make me sad that, like, I missed it to some degree. Just except that I was super engrossed in what I was watching when Birdman was happening when I was there, and that's that I was watching Drive, which is a play by Sharon Wheatley, who is some folks who are into Broadway will know her as one of the folks in Come From Away, which got its start at La Jolla Playhouse, and this is a site-specific theater piece um, that tells the story of the summer she spent in 2020 during the height of the pandemic, doing a cross-country trip with her wife, and at points with her two kids and a dog as well, in an RV. Then they took the kids to visit their dad from the East Coast to San Diego, and then kind of drove around the Western United States for a while, and then drove back. Her wife is a stage manager. Sharon, of course, is an actor, and it's just one of those like exceptionally well made plays in terms of the writing. It's based on the memoir, and Sharon wrote it herself. It's performed by her. She's playing herself, and her one of her co-stars from Come From Away, uh, who is specifically Astrid Van Wieren, plays Sharon's wife. Looking at my notes, and you know, it's a well-made play that's site-specific. It's funny. It's poignant. The crux of it is about Sharon sort of processing uh, that her youngest is going through a gender transition, and she looks at that and kind of casts that against her own, sexual and gender identity. But it's all done in a way that feels, natural, and not like someone trying to recreate moments in their life, not something that gets overly, broken down or overly intellectualized. It's just really lived in.
Mm.
Um, at one, I had the right to sit, but I chose to stand, and then regretted it when, like, after like the second scene, they like were handing out Capri Suns to the people who were seated, and I saw like Landon and Landon's girlfriend and Lauren Bello, all of whom were like there. Those folks in the LA Versa Theater scene who like I could have been sitting next to. All get Capri Suns, lemonade Capri Suns. I was like, why didn't I sit?
I
But
love that this is a big regret for you from,
I was so
wow,
thirsty right then,
witnessing.
though. I was thirsty, and they're giving out lemonade, and they're giving out Capri Sun lemonade. And then like afterwards, there were s'mores. We got s'mores. We got to make s'mores over the fire that they built. And Astrid heard me complaining, and then did a bit with me. Um, and then got me a Capri Sun. So I'll be forever thankful for Astrid for both doing the bit with me, because I felt like I got a one-on-one. And then after that, we went inside the RV and checked it out. And one of Sharon's kids was actually there and said, "Oh yeah, no, that was the real RV." Like somehow magically, they got the actual RV they were in for the show,
Wow.
um, which is just kind of weird and magical and wonderful. I mean, it made a bit of sense. They returned the RV to San Diego, so there's some of that going on. But it was great. It was with the kind of thing you want site specific theater to be.
Well, and I think, as your kind of lead into this was that you weren't able to like get to see all of Birdman because you're focused on Drive, you're watching, and sort of
Yeah,
the frustration of not being able to see. And I think that's such a great sign of a massively successful
yeah,
festival. um, to not get to see everything, and then to have these conversations, you get to experience it at least a little bit through someone else, and to
yeah,
have that itch that didn't get totally scratched in a way that you're excited to go back.
yeah. I got tapped on the shoulder by the press officer for La Jolla, who was like, "Oh, Birdman's happening right behind you." And I looked behind, and I was like, "Wow, it really is." I'm really into this right now, though. I'm going to go back to watching the play.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was so engrossed, and one of the things that was interesting was like Drive started a little later, uh, because of sound bleed from Brassroots, right? Like this is another factor of this thing, right? So like they started a little later, and then there's like the announcements being made because they're doing another choreo and Fly in the Shell at the time, and you know uh, it didn't, for us at the audience, it didn't take anything away from it. Afterwards, the actors were kind of talking like, "Oh, it's like there's all this stuff going on, and like we don't know," and I told them like, "Don't worry about it. Like it's more distracting for you than it is for us. We're engrossed in what you're
Mhm.
doing. So you don't have to worry about us losing focus because there's stuff going on behind us, but it's definitely not easy for them based on, the layout of it, which is one of the challenges of working in this kind of setup.
Right.
Because the sort of the advantage of the ratty shell as a space, and we're about to leave the shell and go to a different space entirely, of this area as a space, is that everything is very convenient. It's very close. There's like one show that's like a 5-minute walk away, and there's another that's a 5-minute drive away. But the vast majority of everything is right there. But it
Right.
does mean that sound can be an issue for some things, and but from a audience point of view, it was definitely a lot easier audio wise than the past few wows have been at. We're at Liberty Station,
Yeah.
which is a wonderful space in terms of layout and space for people to do things, but has the unfortunate fact of being in the flight path for San Diego Airport. And at certain times of the day, a lot of the day, there's just an airplane going overhead like every 6 minutes. So that was always disruptive, to say the least.
I
And that
do
was
want
not
to
happening here
say,
at all.
right. I want to take just a quick moment because I had a lot of frustrations with last year and I had frustrations around that issue. There were also some other production and logistical issues um, that I ran into. And I really want to tip my hat to Amy Ashton for this year because I do feel like the new location, I mean, yes, you're going to have challenges, especially with a festival like this. You're always going to have challenges, and it's going to be incredibly demanding to try to give every piece exactly what it needs when you also
Mm-hmm.
have this really great overlap that I do think is also just a huge bonus. That there were things that for me, the way that different pieces segued into one another or their proximity, um, I found that to be hugely additive. So massive challenges, and yeah, really tip my hat to the programming, the new location. There were so many things where, for me, this was uh, just a massively joyful experience overall.
All right. So
And now we're going to
we
leave there.
we leave there. We leave the ratty shell. We go 5 minutes away to the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, which is the home for La Lucha, which was in previews this past weekend at WoW. So everything we're about to talk about is the preview version of the show, but they're pumping a good number of people through. This is the latest from Optica Moderna, which is led by David Israel Reynoso, who was on the show recently. So if you listen to that episode, you can get a real big breakdown of what the show's about and everything. And again, that's and I walked into the show with that fully in mind. At its core, what this is it is a immersive theater piece in the sense of immersive theater. 8 people go in. They are fitted with this little I mean, functionally, they're blinders is what you're fitted with, so that your vision is slightly obscured. The peripheral vision is obscured, and you're focused down into a little square window. You wear headphones. There is a soundtrack pumping into your headphones, and depending on how loud you make it, really pumping in. And then 8 people, you go in together. You're go down a hallway while functionally blindfolded. You're each taken in front of a door that you can see the door, and everyone is the door's open. You go in, and depending on what door you're in, you might be in a scene where there are 4 of you and one actor, where there's 2 of you and an actor, or there's 1 of you and an actor. And that from there, the audience is sort of threaded in and out of this story that revolves around these 4 characters, all of whom at the beginning of the show are wearing luchador masks, hence La Lucha. This is a dream world of Mexican wrestling, where the idea is that, taking from the core of Mexican wrestling, the idea that if you're defeated, you're unmasked and humiliated. The worst thing that can happen to you in this world is that your mask is taken from you, or you take your mask off and people can see your face, and you can wind up being branded, dishonorably, and kind of cast out of the world of the luchador, because you are no longer masked. And all of that is used as a metaphor for these characters' lives and stories and identities and desires. That's sort of the show thematically in a nutshell. I know that we've landed on different places on the spectrum in terms of how we felt about the show. So, Laura, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, so I seem to be the outlier, at least at the moment, or at least with the little bit that I know. Knowing your take from your diary, I read Todd Martin's review in the LA Times, so I seem to have just an overall, like, a different impression. And um, one of the things that really struck me that Todd said was that this was so these luchador masks that the cast is wearing, and so there's no dialogue, no one is speaking. This is really through gestural movement, that you're understanding. There's a little bit of text at the very beginning on a screen, and I just have some concerns about, like, how certain things were presented. So actually, let me back up for just a second. One of the things so my experience with David's work, with Optica Moderna's work, before La Lucha, was just one experience, and that was a remote digital experience, all pre-recorded, no live performance. This was actually part of Digital Wow. And it was called Portaleza. And I thought that it was absolutely wonderful. I was really impressed by there was interactivity. It was on rails, it was automated. It didn't feel like it. And I thought it was a really delightful, kind of lyrical, abstract experience. And one of the ways that you are sort of the introductory framework is through this optician. And so when we were led into this initial space for La Lucha, I realized that this optician framework is a through line because I hadn't yet listened to the podcast. Again, there were other things that I just didn't want to know going into this. I wanted to go in without any of that. And I think what bumped me was that if the optician framework is going to be this kind of through line, in terms of onboarding and kind of how you cross the threshold from the real world, you go through this kind of intermediary space of the optician, and you're here to be fitted with your kind of special headpiece, and how your vision is isolated. You kind of have this sort of amazing proscenium that actually is really helpful, these blinders that Noah's referring to. There's things about that I really love. But before we even did that, there was actually text about the characters, the La Lucha characters, and a little bit about that story. So I actually felt kind of bounced around a little bit. And all of this is couched with, again, the awareness that this is in previews. This is an incredibly ambitious show. There's so much about it that does work that I think is really extraordinary. But I had a hard time kind of bouncing between, I've got some information about La Lucha, these 4 characters. I'm now going through this whole kind of optician situation. And then I'd really kind of forgotten some of that information about La Lucha and those characters. So that to me was actually a little problematic just from the jump. What I also want to say is that then in this, like, onboarding, you get fitted with your headset, with your headphones, and there is this um, there's this other experience before you're led into the doors that Noah's talking about, that I thought there's a rope, and your vision is obscured. And I thought this was fantastic. I was so startled by that moment, and I don't really want to say anything else about it, because I do
Right.
think that it really, it caught me off
It's
guard in a
executed
way.
really well.
It's
Like
executed really well. And I think, again, the thing in terms of when we talk about magic circle and crossing the threshold, um, this was something that was executed beautifully. It's not an overly complex idea in and of itself, but it sort of shakes, the way that I articulate it is that, like, it sort of shakes your etch a sketch brain.
mhm.
Like, it was so disorienting for me that I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not thinking about other shows that I saw, or do I need to do laundry when I get home. It really kind of, again, cleared the slate in a way where I was able to be fully present. So
Yes.
I really appreciated that. But I wanted the ordering a little, I didn't want the La Lucha story to be integrated with the optician onboarding. To me, that got kind of muddied. And then I wound up having some trouble later on.
Yeah, I think the advantage of the track I was on, right? So I mean, item the first, right? So in a weird way, this is sort of a 1.5 run for me, right? Because I'd walked
Mhm.
the bare set. Like there was like nothing. There was just the walls, right? Like not a single bit of decoration. Some of the big set piece, kind of at the end of like the first part, before the dramatic turns start to happen. I'm signaling to Laura, verbally, like what it is I'm talking about. Like that space where we all are, that was just plywood. Like the shape was there, but it was just undecorated plywood. And I didn't
Yeah.
even know. I honestly thought the next space was something entirely different. I'll tell you what I thought it was when I walked it. So I was so surprised. I was, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Um, like my imagination like went a totally different way while walking the set. But the track I was on was the track of the character of Belen, who is the sister of the groom. Like we're told that there's a wedding going to happen. She's the sister of the groom who is in love with La Lucha, right? Like Belen is in love with Lucha, who is the bride to be. Her brother is the groom to be, and um, this information I was given in the first scene through pantomime, through some very simple pantomime where she had and just get ready. Like if hopefully I should have put a spoiler warning on this. Like like we're gonna spoil parts of this. Sorry, I'm about to spoil it. Jump now to where the music is. Just leave. Get out, right? Get out now because it's there's no safety from here, right? This was your last warning. I'm going to say the thing now. Um, she's got a photograph, and the photograph is she takes a photograph out, and she also has the wedding invitation, and she points to uh, the man's name, Morfino, I think is his name, and points to the man, and then she points to Lucha's name, and points to Lucha, and then she points to herself, and points to the picture. And then she takes the picture and folds it Mad Magazine style so that no longer is she on one side of the groom and Lucha on the other, but she folds it so the groom is no longer there and Lucha and Belen are together. Right. So like very, very, very simple storytelling. But I had the narrative from that perspective straight up down pat. One of the things I thought was interesting about Todd's write up is that Todd kept referring to Lucha as the widow because he wound up being really grounded into Lucha and Morfino, right? So like
Mhm.
where you start, which track where you start with, I think can determine greatly whether or not the narrative is flowing really cleanly. And I think that one of the things technically that was difficult because I was also aware of the people. Like you come out of the piece and you go into a cantina and you're kind of with the group you're with, and it's a great moment to like kind of check in with other people and the strangers who we were going through the piece with and not talking. And we had two women with us who had no idea what was going on. Like they were really lost. Like I'll cop to that. There were people really lost. I saw some people walk in to the cantina who I could tell like they just weren't having it. These were also, of course, people who were wearing like shirts with a luchador mask on them. I think they thought they were coming to something entirely different. And some
Oh,
of that's the nature of what the marketing on the show is doing. Like I think people are coming prepared for one thing and not expecting. I don't think people are expecting a tragic queer romance based on the marketing. which is
yeah,
which is
right,
what it
right.
is. It's a tragic queer melodrama, right? With luchador aesthetics. It is not, it's not Mexican wrestling, like, and if you think you're getting Mexican wrestling, particularly if you're you could be severely disappointed, and maybe even out of sorts, which is, funny in its own right in some ways. But I suspect, because I haven't seen the other three starting scenes, and I don't even know if like it's a guaranteed track. Like you can, there's some mixing and mishmashing that happens. I don't know how they're picking people to go in different ways and get one-on-one moments later down the road. Like, did you ever have a moment where it was just you and the performers? Were you pulled off at any
No,
point?
I was with other participants the entire time. The size of our group and exactly who else was in it did change, but I never
Yeah.
had a one-on-one.
Yeah. There's at least two one-on-ones in there, because there's one at the start, I definitely watched them pull someone away in the middle at one point. Um, for some reason, we had seven people in our group and not eight. So like I don't I don't know. I don't know what happened with the math there. Um, but I I don't know if the storytelling, because that moment of you being literally shown, having someone point to me and look me in the eye to like make sure that I'm following along, right? Like that's such a great way to be grounded into what's happening. I don't think that's happening in any other scenes. And to your point about the video wall at the beginning, which is kind of giving us, it's the prologue and it's kind of giving us the dramatis personae. It's telling us there was an auto accident, where I think the frame is like, oh, we're going into someone's memories, right? Like that seems to be what the idea is here, to sort of hinted at without being told directly. Um, but be, but there's names, but there's no visuals, and um, with the exception of Lucha, uh, from what I could tell, uh, the other three characters are played by different actors in the different acts.
Right.
So you only have their mask, the shade, the pattern and the color of their mask, and you're under different colored lights at times. So it can be
Yeah.
it can be easy to forget who is who because you haven't been looking at that mask pattern forever. And one thing I thought was like, well, maybe if we saw the mask during that video thing, but you have a really solid point here in in just the fact that being given the story before we're taken through the optician, right? Like there is an order of operations, maybe even problem there.
Yeah, I think so. And I do think that that could be, I mean, not to get overly prescriptive and, sort of step outside the lines, but like, I do think, yeah, there's a moment before this kind of etch a sketch moment that I'm referring to. I think there's actually, there is a good space. There is a good opportunity where then you've gone through this whole sort of like, you're having this eye exam. This is sort of this really interesting framework. Um, Stepping you into this space, and that's its own kind of prologue, and then you have this sort of specifically La Lucha prologue that helps to ground you into like, okay, this is the story that you're entering now. I do, a huge fan of Todd Martin's, but I do disagree with him around the masks because so yes, you do have multiple actors playing. I mean, again, I'm in agreement with you from what I know. It's not like this is my work, but you have multiple actors who are playing the same role. They don't necessarily have the same, height, shape. The costuming varies because it's from scene to scene. It might be a jump in time. I could not. So one of the things Todd said was that, there's some dim lighting throughout. It's very kind of melancholy, is the tone. Totally agree with that. The sets are incredible. I absolutely felt completely immersed in these stunning worlds, incredible attention to detail. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was so frustrated that Todd had said, like, this is very like emotionally driven. It feels like the goals of this piece, and David's goals in this are like, it's really about capturing these emotional moments and not so much the plot or the story. And for me, I disagree with that. I come at this more, I'm going to be anchored. I spent so much time trying to figure out, wait, who is this? Is this Belen? I just felt like I was wasting so much time and energy trying to understand the sort of rules of this world through, they're the same masks, but then I can't really tell, is this the same color as the mask in this other scene? Especially when this other actress is like so slight, so tiny. This other actress is much taller. So those things actually really did take me out, and I wanted to know the story. I wanted to understand the story much more so than I did. And I it's so rare that I will ever say anything like this, but so having a background in mime really came in handy in just my sort of analysis of the show. I really wanted there to be sort of much more restraint and design around the gestures and around the movement. There was such incredible attention to detail to the sets, and there was a real spectrum with the performers. There's one scene, a solo performer that's in like a boxing ring, and this person seemed to clearly have a dance background, and there was such economy in movement. And so even though I felt like I didn't necessarily understand exactly who that character was, it was also early in the show. But I really felt something based on what to me felt like highly choreographed, very economical movements. And there were other scenes where the gestures it felt like there was a lot of repetition, but in ways where I was like, because to your point, like there were certain things where I did not understand Belen's relationship to Lucha. I had Lucha's track, so part of it may be that. But I also felt like there were so many gestures that were kind of used over and over again, but seemed to be used in different contexts. And one of the things that you do in mime, I mean, we had discussions, our mime troupe, around like, what is the common denominator here? What is the universal gesture for this type of activity? Or trying to communicate this particular emotion or this particular thing. And so there were things where I just felt like I was so distracted on a visual level in terms of color and light and not being able to track the masks. But I also felt like if there's going to be no dialogue, I have no problem with that. But it really felt like gesturally, it wasn't supporting the story in ways that I think would really help everybody. And some of that is also just in terms of knowing how to behave. I had a conversation with someone about this as well. Not so much that like you need to know what your role is as an audience member in a hyper specific way, but that you don't necessarily know how to behave in a space and how that can, and like to your point around the marketing, and maybe there's people coming in and not knowing, how do they as audience members who are interacting with the performers, what is expected of them in this space? So I do think there were some things there that for me were I bumped up against them. And I said at the top of the show I was going to reference Sleep No More in relationship to La Lucha, and I was really wrestling with why are there certain things that aren't bumping me, that don't bump me in Sleep No More, that are bumping me here with La Lucha? I don't have all the answers to that, but I really felt myself, and some of that may be my own ignorance around the luchador culture. So I don't know if this is an issue where like this really isn't made for me. I like to think that it is, but I really struggled with not having a clear story. And so I wanted more of that so that I could really settle into the space.
Well, I feel like it as a gestalt, as like a dreamlike sequence, it really works for me. I think it's also interesting, your experience of Optica Moderna so far was Portaleza, which was very different from what the kind of work they've done before. Waking La Llorona and Las Quinceañeras, in some ways, like there's thematic elements in La Lucha that almost feel like they are directly related to Las Quinceañeras. Like there's some repetition of story in some direct ways around the relationship between the two women. Um, I do find it interesting that it didn't click for you that Lucha that Belen was in love with Lucha, and there was a dimension of that there. Um, that I feel like if you were on Lucha's track and didn't get that, that's really interesting to me because of course I read, I was given a note, like the note that Lucha gets at a certain point, that sets some things in motion. Like I was carrying that myself,
Mm-hmm.
from my scene with Belen, into the later scene. And so there was such a, for me, because I was in that track, there was such a clear story that was happening. Like I was holding the MacGuffin that created the inciting incident, that moved the story forward. And if there are other elements that are not grokkable for like the people who are vibing with the other two characters, or the
Mm-hmm.
other three characters, then there's definitely some work to be done there. But I'll say this much: like the Belen track is, from my point of view, is pretty clean, um, and generally, like Optica Moderna's vibe is dreamlike. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not supposed to be literal. It's supposed to be a little mysterious, more than a little mysterious. Um, so uncertainty's okay. Um, questioning, like I remember when I came through Awakening La Llorona, by the end of it, I was like, wait, was I La Llorona through most of it? Or was, at one point it felt like I encountered, but other times it felt like I was embodying. And
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, I don't use the term gestalt loosely when I refer to Optica Moderna's work, because it has gestalt dream therapy logic from my point of view, where at any given moment you might be that character. Now you're outside that character. Now you're the chair, right? Like take it
Right.
from this point, take it from that point. And it creates that experience. That's how I've always understood them. But being dropped in for
And
the
I
first
think,
time, it may not get that impression.
well, and I do think, I mean, Portaleza was very dreamlike and it totally
Mm-hmm.
worked for me and was really stunning. I think so to just be maybe a little bit more specific and hopefully offer any clarity. Like so Lucha has physical gestures that she does with her. So the four characters are her father, Lucha, her fiance, and her friend Belen. And there are physical gestures that she did with her father, with her fiance, and with Belen. So you have, what I thought was platonic love and affection for her friend Belen. Then there's romantic love with her fiance, and then there is familial love with her father. So that's where I'm kind of like, I didn't pick up on this. Now that's mainly like Lucha to Belen, but like it just didn't translate for me. And again, I may really be an outlier here, but I just felt like there were things where, again, without any dialogue, and I actually really loved the restrictions. Like I love the restrictions on what I, could see and could hear, and that there was no dialogue. I was very happy to be a part of this world and this experience. But I did find that I think because I don't know if some of it, I guess maybe it's just something that I'm going to continue to think about, because it really, there is something there that felt very different for me, where I thought it was really lovely. I was enjoying it. But I think I was invested. I think if anything, it's a real compliment. I just wanted to know more
Yeah.
about exactly what was happening. And not that I needed it all like perfectly spelled out, but I
Yeah.
definitely was confused. And I really was so enjoying my time. I just wanted to know a little bit better about, okay, what is happening?
You wanted some more of what my professor, Muhammad Kausar, would call narrative clarity, right? You
Yeah.
wanted that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting more of that. And I got to go through the piece with intense narrative clarity, right? And I have and I'm really enthusiastic about the piece, and that narrative clarity I have is enabling that. So the puzzle
Right.
piece for them on this one does seem to be, can they bring more of that narrative clarity in to at least the Lucha track? And I think we'll have to turn to the audience for folks who got the Morfino, who's like the groom, and the father, whose name I can't remember at all, but the father's track, whether or not they got narrative clarity. Like what was that story about? And but it's also, what's a joy in the abstract for me about this piece. And we got to go head off into the sunset here, because we're hour 22 in on what was supposed to be an hour, and I gotta get to a show. Um, is that it has been a long time since I've been to a multi-tack dark ride show and been able to have this trade notes with people about what they saw,
Mhm.
um, in a way that felt like there was um, a, a real need to trade notes, a point to it, and that the intention was there for us to do that, because we weren't being given some big set piece at the end of like a gamified thing, that also had threads, running in and out of it, which is, at least
Mhm.
in LA, like all I've seen in like the past year or two when it comes to there being multiple tracks, is something like that, something that felt more like instanced, massively multiplayer role playing games than a dark ride doing this. And this show made me realize how freaking much I missed that format, and how good that format is in and of itself. So hopefully this, the folks who are coming down and checking it out, like they'll be inspired to get back into working in this mode.
Mhm.
That's one of my big takeaways from this, along with one of the other takeaways that I have. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
any last thoughts on the festival as a whole before we ride off into the sunset and lament that
I
we
mean,
can't
just
run around run around the festival this weekend?
I mean, I am thrilled that work like La Lucha and the rest of the festival, that this work is being made, it's being produced, it's being supported. I just want there to be, I mean, this is me on my like little soapbox kind of every day. Like there's so much value and joy in this work. So I just want it to continue to be supported and for that to keep building, because these are extraordinary experiences. And we're very lucky to be able to go down to WoW. I really wish that these platforms would get larger and larger for all of this. I mean, some of this work it's absolutely stellar. And I would love for more people in other places to get to experience it. It really can be so transformative, and that's not hyperbole.
Indeed. Well, once again, this has been our look of our little window into the 2023 Without Walls Festival. I'm sure I gave some disclosures at the top of the show. Also / a reminder myself to give some disclosures at the top of the show. Don't worry, I did. They'll happen. But actually, let me sandwich if you've forgotten. It's like we've done some behind the scenes talking with the Without Walls team, so it's like we cannot review, we can only share. But look at us, not reviewing, being brutally honest, because that's the people we are. Can't help it. But know that we have a vested interest in the festival as a whole continuing on as well. So both from just wanting something to cover and also getting to work with that team. And I'm excited about what they've pulled off this time, where they're going, and what it could mean in a real way. There's a lot of folks who look to WoW, not just here in the Southland, but like throughout the country, throughout the world. It's an international festival, and it is one of the bigger platforms there is for the kind of work that we love. So thanks again to Amy, to Mia, to everyone at the Playhouse for putting it on, and looking forward to next year, something fierce. Once again, I want to thank Laura for being my co-host. That's what we did. My co-host this week. And again, to the team at LuchaA Playhouse for putting on a really great festival. This was a long one. I'm looking at the clock. It's like 1:31 right now in terms of how long this is. It's not 1:31 in the morning or something like that. But you've listened to this for a while. So I will spare you anything longer. You've heard a lot of me. Except just to say, we are really looking forward to getting the next stage up and running. It's crunch time, baby. And next week you're going to hear about our sponsors. It's a couple of pretty cool sponsors have jumped in to make sure that we can pull this thing off. So it feels good. It feels good. We're ready to do it. We're set to do it. Now we just got to get you there. All right. So that's what's up with that. Nothing else on the radar at the moment. I can't see past the blinders, but next week, another episode. I don't know what it is. It might be one of the ones that I have in the can. It might be something I'm recording next week. I almost barely know what day it is anymore. So, but it is Friday, when I'm doing this and the podcast is coming out. And now I'm going to stop babbling and do the associate producer of No Proscenium is Parker Sella. See, I stopped babbling. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. The NoPro podcast is written, edited, hosted, produced, and mixed, when there's mixing, by yours truly. I'm Noah Nelson, and until next time, I'll see you at the show.